Okay, good evening, everybody. Tonight's class is sponsored by Rabbi Yosef and Vicky Morovich in honor of their new great-granddaughter, which was born today.
Mazel tov.
Mazel tov. Now that they joined the, don't want to say the word, but the senior citizen group in its fullest. Okay, let's get back where we were learning last week. I know a number of you people were not on last week, but so let's just review briefly and continue. Last time we were learning in halacha and Tanya. So we're learning in halacha the dinim of Shemona Esrei, and that when you Davin, you're not allowed to make any separation between the bracha Ga'al Yisrael and the Shemona Esrei. Before you daven, you have to understand to whom you're davening. You have to remove all your other thoughts, other foreign thoughts. You're standing before the King of Kings. And basically, especially during the week, we are asking Hashem for personal needs. We're asking for wisdom and tshuva and health and wealth and happiness and all those things. So we know if you're standing in the presence of the king and you want to ask for favors from the king, you don't think about other things. You think completely, totally on what you're asking Hashem or the king to do. And therefore, when a person davens, they have to know at least the meaning of the first bracha of the Amidah, the first bracha of Shemona Esrei, from Baruch Atah Hashem until Baruch Atah Hashem Magen Avraham. You have to know what the words mean. Technically, in Shulchan Aruch it says if you didn't think what the words mean, you have to daven again. But the Alter Rebbe says nowadays it's not going to help because the second time repeating you also won't do it. So therefore, today they're more lenient with this. But technically it shows just how important having the intent, especially by the first bracha, the Shemona Esrei, exactly what the words mean. We put our feet next to one another when we daven, okay? Because we want to be likened to angels. And by angels, the pasuk says, Ragleim regel yeshara, their feet are like a straight foot. So therefore, even though angels don't have physical feet, obviously, they're spiritual beings, but a person puts the feet together that it should look like 1 foot. You're not allowed to look around during Shemona Esrei. In fact, it says if you don't have a siddur, you have to daven with your eyes closed. You're not allowed to look around during Shemona Esrei. You're not allowed to make any motions during Shemona Esrei. You're not allowed to say nothing during Shemona Esrei. You're not allowed to hold anything in your hands during the Shemona Esrei except a siddur. That's it. It says in halacha what happens if I'm using the word mother because that's more common. What happens if the mother is davening Shemona Esrei and there's a kid yelling and screaming, and the lesser of the evils would be to pick up the child and hold them, that they wouldn't scream at least, and you can have more intent, then you're allowed to. But generally speaking, when a person davens Shemona Esrei, you're not allowed to have anything in your hand. You have to have proper kavanah. We mentioned last week, and then this is the last thing before we move on, that there's a lot of different nuschois. There's Ashkenaz, there's Nusach Svard, there's Chabad, there's Svardik davening, and even that there are variations. Every text of davening is holy, and therefore you can't mix the texts together at one tefillah, because every text is holy. Every text has exactly the amount of words in it, and you're going to start changing words, daven this and half of this and half of that. So then you're not going to be actually having the proper intent of the exact amount of words. Okay, this is where we're up to now. Next thing is like this. We learn out a lot of laws of the Shemona Esrei, of the Amidah from Chana. In the first chapter of the book of Shmuel, which we read on the Haftarah on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, speaks about the story of Chana, that her husband Elkanah had 2 wives, Penina and Chana. Penina had 7 kids. Chana had no kids. She came to the Bais Din, and she was praying, and it says over there she would daven very quietly, just her lips were moving. And Eli, the high priest, thought she was a drunkard. And he yelled at her, and she said, no, I'm not. I'm a broken-hearted woman. I want a kid. Anyway, that whole story. So there's a number of laws of davening we learn out from Chana. The primary law we learn from Chana is that when you daven Shemona Esrei, you have to daven quietly. You have to hear the words, but nobody else next to you should be able to hear the words. Only the Chazan says it out loud. But a person who davens Shemona Esrei, whether it's Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv, Musaf, no matter what it is, you have to daven quietly, like it says by Chanukah, by Chana, that her lips move. But I do want to say something very important. There is a mitzvah of davening, which primarily is the Shemona Esrei. There's a mitzvah of Shema, there's a mitzvah of davening. The biblical or rabbinic mitzvah, depending on the different opinions, is basically, there's a biblical, the way Chassidim holds, there's a biblical mitzvah to daven. The biblical mitzvah is to say the words. If somebody will just take a siddur and reading it with the eyes without saying the words, they did not fulfill their obligation of Shemona Esrei. They have to daven again. It's like they didn't daven at all. Anything, the same thing with Birchat Hamazon, benching, anything Hallel, that a person has an obligation to say it verbally, reading it with your eyes without saying the words, you are not fulfilling your obligation. And a lot of people are unaware of that din. So therefore, but you have to say it quietly. We learn out from Chana, and you have to hear the words yourself that you're saying, but nobody else should hear it. It says Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, halacha says you could daven a little bit louder because voice awakens the intention, the kavanah, but not too loud that it's going to disturb somebody else. Another thing, we mentioned this briefly last week, when you daven Shemona Esrei, you have to stand. If you have to stand, then you're not allowed to lean on something that if you pull it away, you're going to fall down. You can't lean on something, on a table, on a chair, in a way that if they would pull away the chair, you'd fall down, because then it's not called standing, it's called leaning, and leaning is not standing. So yes, if a person is sick and they're not able to stand, they could daven standing. But a normal, regular, healthy person has to daven the Shemona Esrei standing, and the definition of standing is you're not leaning on something. I mean, you could touch it. As long as you're not putting your weight on it, that in a way that you pull it away, you're going to fall down. Ideally, you should face the wall, but in a show, it doesn't matter if there's people in your way. Now, again, what we mentioned now, this is where the din is. You're not allowed to daven against the picture. If you do, you have to close your eyes. If you're facing a mirror, closing your eyes doesn't help. So you have to turn your face or whatever. Okay, another thing is like this. When a person is davening the Shemona Esrei, they're standing in the presence of Hashem. So you need to be bodily respectful, meaning you can't burp, you can't pass gas, you can't anything like that, or yawn in the middle of Shemona Esrei. You're not allowed to yawn and go, like stretching. All those things you're not allowed to do. If somebody has to yawn, says you're just tired, and you have to yawn, it says you have to cover your mouth. It's just disrespectful to stand in the presence of the King of the Kings in a way that you're going to be disrespectful. You're allowed to, your body could be touching an object, providing, again, that you're not leaning on it in a way that you're going to fall down. Okay, now, what happens if your man's davening Shemona Esrei and the talus falls off? So as long as the majority of the talus is still on, you can put it back on. If it all falls off, you have to let it there until after the davening. Okay, another very important thing in davening is as follows. You have to daven facing Eretz Yisrael, facing the Bais Din. The Medrashim say, our sages tell us that the tefillos go through the place of the Bais Din. All the tefillos go through the place the place of the Bais Din. So therefore, you have to face Yerushalayim when you daven. Which means, if you're west of Israel, you face east. If you're south of Israel, you face north. You're north, you face south. If you're east, you face west. Bottom line is, you face towards Eretz Yisrael. So let's say we live in America. So America is, you have to face east. Because Eretz Yisrael is east of where we are. Certain places in Europe, you'd have to face south. Certain places you'd have to face north or west. Now, what happens, by the way, it's another interesting thing. In Israel, they daven toward Yerushalayim. Wherever you are in Israel, it's not north, west, south, depending where you are. You daven facing Yerushalayim. If you're north of Yerushalayim, you daven south. If you're south of Yerushalayim, you daven north. It's not the concept of east. East is because where we live, Yerushalayim is east of us. So we face east. Now, even in Yerushalayim, wherever you are, you face the Kotel. Because that's the place of where the Bais Din is. Now, what happens if somebody doesn't know? Okay, today on your phone, you have compasses. You could daven very easily. You know, you can know where you're going, basically. So then, if you don't know, and you can't find out, so it says you could daven in any direction, providing, you know, you have in mind to Yerushalayim. In your heart, you're thinking about the tefillah should go to Hashem through Yerushalayim. And here's a very interesting thing to note. There are a lot of shuls, by the way, for convenience. I must say, even in LA and in Beverly Hills, there are shuls that are not facing east. The Ardent Kaddish is not facing east. Now, so now the question is, everybody's facing east, right? I mean, facing the direction of where the Bais Din is. I want to see one thing, 1 second. Okay, now, there's an interesting story with the Rebbe in Tafshin Yud Zayin, 1957, where the Rebbe went to camp twice. I think this story took place in 1957. The Rebbe went to Camp Gan Yisrael. And they had a big multi-purpose room, which was the shul, and where they had activities, and, you know, in fact, the Rebbe washed and gave out Kersha Bracha. The Rebbe Davin Mincha there. So when it came time to Davin Mincha, the Ardent Kaddish was in a certain direction. So the Rebbe asked, which way is east? The Rebbe didn't realize just the fact that the Ardent Kaddish was there. The Rebbe asked the staff which way was east, and of course nobody knew. This is, don't forget, 1957 is before phones with the compasses and all that stuff. So the guys didn't know. So the Rebbe, the practical genius that he was, walked outside. It was Mincha time, so it was in the late afternoon. The Rebbe saw which direction the sun was setting, so that's west. So the Rebbe knew that east is the opposite direction. And the Rebbe davened then facing east, not facing the Ardent Kaddish in the shul. So it says in our, what the Rebbe, Friedrich Rebbe writes in a letter, and based on what the Rebbe did, what happens if you're in a shul? And then I want to say one thing. I'm going to say the din, and I'm going to spring out another very important point to keep in mind. The din is the way we hold. The Mishnah Berurah holds differently, but we hold that you face east even if the Ardent Kodesh is facing south or north or whatever. But you have to keep one thing in mind. If you're going to do that and it's going to cause a fight in the shul, oh, what are you doing? You're facing, you know, that whole thing, then you're not allowed to do it. You can turn your head maybe a little bit to make it inconspicuous. But a person is not allowed to use this to create an argument and a fight amongst Jews. Gadol hashalom between one person and the next is of the ultimate importance. There are a few things, by the way, that we don't give in, even if it's a question of an argument, because it's dangerous, but not this. So our custom is, if you're in a shul where the Oren Kodesh is not facing east, our custom would be to make and do it as inconspicuously as possible. We face east anyway. Again, if you don't know which direction it is, so then you daven in any direction and you have in mind the Eretz Yisrael. What happens if you're in the middle of Shemona Esrei already and you realize you're facing the wrong direction? Okay, so you can't move your legs. You're not allowed to move in the middle of Shemona Esrei. You just turn your body. Let's say you're facing this way and you're supposed to face this way, but you're already davening, so you can't move your legs. You just turn your body this way, keeping your feet where they are, and then you daven facing that way. Okay, now the Chachamim instituted also that we bow in the Shemona Esrei in 4 places: the beginning and end of the first bracha, and beginning and end of the bracha of Vaad Din. Now, at the beginning of Shemona Esrei, we say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Elokei Yisrael. That bracha finishes Baruch Atah Hashem Magen Avraham. So the din is as follows: when you say Baruch, you bend your knees. Atah, you bow down. When you say Hashem, before you say Hashem, you have to straighten up. It says Hashem, Zoykef Kfufim, Hashem straightens the bent ones. So anytime we say Hashem's name, we cannot say bending down. We have to stand up. So you say Baruch, we bend our knees, because Baruch, by the way, means Birkayim, which in Hebrew means knees, the knees. Ato, we bow down, and then before we say Hashem, we get up. That's at the Baruch Ato, at the beginning of the first bracha and the end of the first bracha. Now, when we bow by Meidim, we say Meidim Anachnu Loch. There's no Baruch Ato. So therefore, by Meidim, we don't bend our knees. We just bend our head down, Meidim Anachnu Loch. And the Rebbe got up earlier, but it says in halacha, you're supposed to stand up, get up before the words Hashem. So you say, Meidim Anachnu Loch, Sha'atahu Hashem Elokeinu. But again, our custom is we get up, we say, Meidim Anachnu Loch, by Loch, we're already up. But then you don't bend your knees. You just bend down and then you straighten up. The end of that bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem, Atayv Shimcha L'chon Noel Ha'odos. Then again, we have Baruch Atah Hashem. So then, Baruch, we bend the knees. Atah, we bow down. And Hashem, before we say Hashem, we straighten up. So there's 4 dimes we're bending in the Shemona Esrei. You're not allowed to bend too far down. That your mouth should be equal with your belly area. You're not allowed to bend down too much either. Okay, now after davening, we learned already. You say Yil Ratzin Imrei Fi V'Yini B'Lefenecho. You say that pasuk, and then we say Elokai Nitzad, which, as we mentioned in the previous class, that was added in the time of the Gemara. It was not added when the Anshe Knesset Agdela, before the second Beis Hamikdash, when they instituted the davening. That was not part of the Shemona Esrei. That's why the Chazan doesn't repeat it like we mentioned. Now, because of that, there's a difference. What happens if you're in the middle of the Shemona Esrei and you're a little slower, or you're davening with more kavanah, or you came late, and the Chazan is saying Kedusha? You do not answer anything in the middle of the Shemona Esrei. Nothing. If the Chazan is saying Kedusha, you stop where you are, you listen, and then when they finish Kedusha, you continue davening. But you don't answer anything in the middle of the Shemona Esrei. Nothing. In the last paragraph, Elokai Nitzor, if you're in that last paragraph, the Alter Rebbe holds that you can answer what you would answer in middle of the brachas of Shema. In a practical sense, I'm going to speak about Kedusha. Let's say the Chaz is getting to Kedusha and you're already in middle of a Elokai Nitzor. So then the din is you can answer Kodesh, 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 Hashem Tzvaros Melech Haaretz Kvedei, Baruch Kved Hashem Memkaimai, and Yimlech Hashem Le'olam. Those three last paragraphs. The first verse, Nagdishach v'Naritoch, you don't answer. You don't answer at all. So in middle of Shemoneh Esrei, you answer nothing. In middle of Elokai Nitzor, you answer Kodesh, Baruch, and Yimlech. Now, one more interesting part over here. If you said Baruch Atah Hashem HaMavarech Esam Yisrael B'Sholem, and you say Yi L'Ratzin Imrei Fi V'Hegin Liba maybe words accepted to Hashem, and you did not start Elokai Nitzor, then you can answer the whole Kedusha. If you said Yehi L'Ratzin Imrei Fi V'Hegin Liba L'Fanach Hashem Tzuri V'Goyali, and you didn't say Elokai, then you can answer the whole Kedusha. What's also relevant is like this, especially for women that come to shul more on Shabbos. You have on Shabbos, it's a longer Kedusha, okay? But the regular verses of the week that you have Nagdishach, Kodesh, Kodesh, Baruch Kved Hashem and Yimlech, okay? Now, if you're in the middle of Elokai Nitzor, okay, and the Chazan is saying Kedusha, you're in the middle of Elokai Nitzor, and the Chazan is saying Kedusha, you stop. You say one line, Kodesh, 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 Hashem Tzvaros Melech Haaretz Kvedei. What's added in Shabbos, you do not say, Oz Bekel. You say Baruch Kved Hashem Memkaimai, only those words, not the whole 5 lines or so, and you answer Yimlech. So in the middle of Elokai Nitzor, you only answer 3 lines. Kodesh, 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 Hashem Tzvaros Melech Haaretz Kvedei, Baruch Kved Hashem Memkaimai, and Yimlech Hashem Le'olam Kachsil David Aliyah. You don't answer any of the additional things in Shabbos. Not Hu Elokeinu, nothing. Just those 3 lines. And that's the din of Shemoneh Esrei. Now, when you finish the Shemoneh Esrei, if you remember, we learned when you start Shemoneh Esrei, you take 3 steps up because you're going to meet the king. So now, when you're leaving the king, you have to take 3 steps back, even though Hashem's all over, but it's our respect. So we go back 3 steps. Okay? Now, if you are a right-footed person, you go back with your left foot first, then your right foot, then your left foot, and then the right foot comes back to the left foot. Okay? So you're taking 3 steps. Left, right, okay? And you put your feet together. If you are a left-footed person, by the way, there's left-handed and left-footed. 2 different things. In a practical way, what is a left-footed person? I know people that are right-handed and left-footed, or vice versa. In practical halacha today, in halacha it says whichever, when you're standing subconsciously, what foot do you move first? But today you could be classified in an easier way. Which foot do you kick a ball with? Do you kick a ball with your left foot, or do you kick with the right foot? If you kick a ball with your left foot, you're left-footed. You kick a ball with your right foot, you're right-footed. Just like the hands, but the hands and feet are not necessarily the same. So if you're a right-footed person, you go out with your left foot because you want to go slow, weaker. If you're a left-footed person, you go with your right foot back first. And then you take the 3 steps and you put your feet together. And then you say the verse, and you say, Yiratin Shabbat Shayibana Beis Hamikdash in that. Now, You take the 3 steps back. Okay. So how do you do Eisa Shalom? So in Sefer Minhagim it says that you do to the left. Eisa Shalom Bimreimav, the 3 words. Then you go to the middle and say who. And then you go to the right and say Yaseh Shalom Aleinu. And back to the middle, Baal Kol Yisrael Vimru Amen. So again, if you're finishing the Shmoneh, what it says in Sefer Minhagim to do, right, to the left first, Eisa Shalom Bimreimav, and that doesn't matter, by the way, if you're right-handed or left-handed, because we're facing Hashem. So we do left first because that's Hashem's right, if He's facing us. So that doesn't matter if you're right-handed or left-footed or right-handed, it doesn't matter. You go Eisa Shalom Bimreimav to the left, who in the middle, Yaseh Shalom Aleinu. So 3 words left, 1 word right, middle, 3 words right, and then the rest of it in the middle. What the Rebbe used to do is the Rebbe did it differently. The Rebbe did Eisa left, Shalom right, and Bimreimav in the middle, and that's it. So the Rebbe did 1 word left, 1 word right, and then in the middle for the rest. Whichever way a person does is fine. For those men, it's interesting. The Rebbe writes in Minhagim that when you do Eisa Shalom by Kaddish, not by davening, by Kaddish, even if you're the Chazan, you say Tiskabot Tzaleisen and you say Eisa Shalom, you go to the right first. So it's right, middle, left, and then back to the middle, or right, left, center, and you say the rest of it. That's a Kabbalistic thing. Davening, you turn left first and then right. If you're saying Kaddish, then you do right first and then left. Take 3 steps back when you're bowing, or do you bow first and then take the step back? In Shulchan Aruch, it's a very interesting question. Do you bow when you go back Eisa Shalom? So in Shulchan Aruch, it says you do. You bend down and you go backwards, bending down. But the Rebbe did. In fact, the Rebbe was, when he was davening Shmoneh, the Rebbe was a little bent down. By Eisa Shalom, he stood erect, and he did not bow when he went backwards. He was standing erect, and so therefore that's what we do. We don't bow when we go back to 3 steps. It doesn't get in Shulchan Aruch, but that's not what we do. We don't do that. Okay. We said to go left first. Okay. Okay, we said it's getting wet, but in Shmoneh you don't make no eye motions, no lip movements, no movement with the fingers. You don't answer anything. So what you do, by the way, like we said, if the Chazan is saying Kedusha, you stop and you listen. And listening, there's a role in Torah that's called Shomea Ka'oneh. Listening is like you said it. When you listen to somebody making Kiddush, okay, what do? You listen, that's like you made Kiddush. When you listen to shofar blowing, it's like you blew the shofar. You hear the Megillah reading, it's like you read the Megillah. So if you're in the middle of Shmoneh, you're not allowed to talk, but you stop and listen, and then it's considered as if you said it. Okay, we're going to go to Tanya now.